Hey there, cozy builders. My name is Sam, and welcome to my Tiny Glade series. In this series, I take inspiration from either the daily Tiny Glade pre-builds, real historical buildings, or mythical places from around the world, and I try and create a beautiful scene within a 1-hour time frame. Then I add some fast-forward magic and share a few fun tidbits related to the build. In today's video, we're going off the prompt Wizard's Castle, where I'll be taking inspiration from the Chateau De Pierrefonds to create the home of King Arthur's magical advisor, Merlin. But before I talk about this famous wizard, I thought I would take some time to give you a little background into the beautiful Chateau De Pierrefonds. Located in northern France, the chateau was built in the late 14th century by the brother of King Charles VI of France. Louis of Orleans built the chateau as a defense fortress strategically placed to control routes between Paris and the Champagne region. In 1617, King Louis XIII ordered it dismantled during the siege against its owner, the Duke of Estrées, who was a nobleman and military commander who sided with opponents of the king during political unrest. Because of that rebellion, King Louis XIII's forces besieged Pierrefonds, captured it, and ordered it dismantled so it couldn't be used as a stronghold against the crown. In 1810, Napoleon bought the ruins for just 3,000 francs, which was basically pocket change for him, and then didn't do a single thing with the chateau. The chateau remained in ruins for over 2 centuries, but in 1857, Napoleon III commissioned architect Eugène Viollet-le-Duc to restore it, not as a practical fortress, but as an idealized medieval fantasy castle, where he added many romantic neo-Gothic elements, extravagant pointed towers and turrets, decorative battlements, a grand ceremonial hall, as well as many other ornate motifs, sculptural details, and murals were added, featuring whimsical gargoyles, dragons, and fantastical beasts. At Pierrefonds, Viollet-le-Duc created a castle that felt like it came straight out of Arthurian romance. Centuries later, tourists can explore the courtyards, towers, great halls, and exhibitions on their own, or join guided tours. The picturesque location also makes it a perfect filming location, which is where our wizard Merlin comes into play. In 2008, filming began at the Chateau De Pierrefonds for the BBC television series Merlin, where they used the historical building as an exterior for Camelot, as the castle's towering walls, turrets, and fairy tale aesthetic made it the perfect stand-in for King Arthur's court in the show. Almost all the exterior shots of Camelot were filmed at Pierrefonds, with focus on the castle walls, gates, towers, and courtyards. Some grand interior scenes like the courtyard cloisters were also filmed there. While the actual chateau appears on screen for most of the show, the production team digitally extended the chateau in post-production, adding more towers, extra walls, and a sprawling lower town to make it look like a massive medieval capital. Areas like the throne room were also recreated on sound stages. Historically, Merlin never lived at the chateau, and there's no medieval connection between the Arthurian wizard and this castle. But after the show aired, Pierrefonds saw a surge in international visitors, many fans coming specifically to see Camelot in real life. Now, I would like to talk about the magnificent man himself, the magical wizard, Merlin. Merlin is one of the most legendary figures in Arthurian myth, a character whose story blends history, folklore, and imagination, making him arguably the most famous wizard in Western literature. However, long before Merlin became the legendary wizard we know today, there were 2 very different figures whose stories would merge to form him. His earliest roots lie in Welsh poetry and chronicles dating from the 6th to 9th centuries, based on the tales of legendary figure Merlin Wult. The story goes that Merlin the Wild supposedly went insane after the horrors of battle. He fled to the forests of northern Britain, where he began a life of solitude and gained prophetic powers that allowed him to speak the truths about the future. The other was Ambrosios Aurelianus, a real-life noble Romano-British war leader, celebrated for rallying his people against invading Anglo-Saxons during the chaotic years of the 5th and 6th century after Rome withdrew from Britain. He was one of the few named and credited leaders from this transitional Dark Ages period, and is remembered for restoring some order and defending his people. Ambrosios himself is rarely remembered outside of historical circles, but his name lives on in Merlin, who preserves his historical authority and gives the legendary wizard a sense of legitimacy. In the 12th century, Geoffrey of Monmouth combined these two figures into a single character named Merlinus Ambrosios. In his written works, History of the King of Britain and Prophecies of Merlin, Geoffrey fused the early Merlin legends with classical and Christian themes. This new Merlin gained military strategy, political influence, and the gift of prophecy. By merging Merlin's wild prophetic wisdom with Ambrosius's noble authority, Geoffrey created a figure who could foresee the destinies of kingdoms and guide them to greatness. This new Merlin became the ideal advisor to kings, a bridge between history and legend, prophecy and politics. He orchestrated the rise of King Arthur, advised the Round Table, and wielded powers that seemed to surpass any mortals. Geoffrey even gave him a mystical origin, claiming Merlin was born of a mortal woman and a demon, thus explaining his extraordinary powers and knowledge. In the following centuries, French romances and English literature expanded Merlin's magical reputation. In the Vulgate cycle, one of the most important collections of medieval romances of the 13th century, Merlin is given an origin story that details his conception, birth, and early childhood, and created a more detailed backstory and character arc. The pages of this French series of epic prose tell several stories of Lancelot, the Holy Grail, and King Arthur's court. Merlin's story takes inspiration from earlier origin stories, like his human mother and demon father, and expands into one of the most detailed accounts of his life in medieval literature. From his earliest years, Merlin displayed astonishing wisdom, foresight, and magical power. He engineers the rise of King Arthur by revealing Arthur's true parentage and arranging the legendary Sword in the Stone test. Once Arthur is king, Merlin becomes his chief advisor, strategist, and magician, using enchantments, disguises, and illusions to guide him through battles and political intrigue. He also serves as a matchmaker and manipulator of events, ensuring that Arthur's destiny and the fate of Britain follow his foreseeable course. The Vulgate cycle also adds a tragic arc to Merlin's life. He falls deeply in love with the Lady of the Lake, and in teaching her his magical secrets, he unwittingly gives her the power to trap him. Despite his immense foresight, he allows himself to be enchanted and imprisoned, knowing it is part of the fate he cannot avoid. Through the Vulgate cycle, Merlin shifts from being just a wise prophet to the quintessential wizard, whose brilliance shapes the entire Arthurian world and influenced nearly all later English Arthurian literature. However, it wasn't until later that Merlin took on his largely recognized characteristics. During the Gothic revival and Romantic periods of the 19th century, Merlin was wholly reimagined as a mystical, almost legendary figure of wisdom and magic, inspiring poets and artists. In modern times, television, film, and literature have cemented his image as the long-bearded, robe-wearing wizard familiar to many. Novels such as Mary Stuart's The Crystal Cave, animated adaptations like The Sword in the Stone, and the shows like BBC series Merlin have made him a symbol of magical wisdom, from ancient Welsh prophecy to medieval literature and modern fantasy. Merlin's history is a fascinating journey through myth, legend, and storytelling, making him the ultimate symbol of wisdom, magic, and guidance. And while many wizards have grown famous around the world, Merlin is one of the only wizarding figures whose embodiment of both magical aura and historical legitimacy makes him one of the most enduring and recognizable wizard icons ever created. And there we have it, folks. I hope you enjoyed this Tiny Glade build and learning a bit about the Chateau De Pierrefonds and the magical history of the wizard Merlin. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to stay up to date on my next upload. Thanks for spending this time with me in Tiny Glade, and I'll see you next time. Bye!